Hello, welcome to Jason the Old Millennial. My name is Jason, speaking here in my basement in the great state of Kansas. And today I'm continuing my list of top 100 favorite albums. I'm now at number 49 on my list, so a little more than halfway through my album list, which I feel like I started like a year ago on making these videos. And today I got this obscure like psychedelic rock album that maybe you heard of. It's called Sgt. Pepper's Lonely Hearts Club Band. Pretty long title there. Came out in 1967. I'm forgetting the name of the group. These four guys that played the Beatles. Sorry, it's from the Beatles. It's their 8th studio album. I hear it's a pretty big album. Of course, I'm joking. I know the Sgt. Pepper's and the Beatles are my favorite band. This is obviously one of the most iconic albums of all time. Huge album, came out. Spent 27 weeks number one in the UK. I mean, if you can think about 27 weeks, there's like 52 weeks in the year. So like half of the year, this was the number one album. Pretty big. 15 weeks number one in the US. So not quite as long in the US, still pretty huge in the US. Won 4 Grammys, including Album of the Year, which my research says that's the first rock album to do so. So without doing too much research, I guess they all must have gone to pop groups and so forth. So that's interesting. We're basically seeing the Beatles break into the mainstream, of course, of rock music, make rock music the mainstream music of the day and the most popular music everybody's listening to. And also is a groundbreaking album that changed everything kind of in a way, and the Grammys had to give it the best album. I would give like every Beatles album the Grammy for best album of the year, or some of them were 2 albums a year, but you would think from 1964 to 1970, every year the Beatles should have album of the year and song of the year. It's crazy to me that they didn't have album of the year and song of the year every year, just about. 'Cause not too many albums could beat them, and not too many songs could beat what the Beatles were doing, in my opinion. Of course, we know 8th studio album, so they're quite far into their. I mean, this is 1967. They basically started in 1962 with their record deal with EMI, and I believe put out their first album in 1963. So you say 1963 to 1967, in a 4-year span, 8 albums. So that's incredible output, and not only incredible output, they're really great albums. As you know, I have not every, but I have 12 Beatle albums in my top 100 albums list. The only one I don't have is Yellow Submarine, for obvious reasons, as doesn't feel like a true Beatles album. But I love all 12 Beatles albums. I listen to all of them all the time. And so I've already talked about with the Beatles, Beatles for Sale, Please Please Me, A Hard Day's Night. I think of the ones I've talked about already. And so this being a huge album, it might be surprising that maybe it seems kind of low to most Beatles fans. A lot of Beatles fans have this as the number one song of all time, and the favorite Beatles album, that's pretty popular, I think. On Rolling Stone's 500 top albums, whatever list, this was number one for a long time. Like, it seemed like this last list, they took it off to number one, and it's not even like number 2 or 3. It's like they took it off. I don't know if it's even top 10 anymore. So I don't know, something happened where they decided that's not as great as it used to be. But it seemed like the 2 times before that, at least, this was always coming out number 1 album of all time. So this is considered one of the great albums, one of the most iconic, most historical significant, most groundbreaking albums that we've ever seen. And it seems like a lot of times I see a list, this is usually on the list of one of the top albums of all time. For me, it's not one of my favorite even Beatles albums, let alone top albums of all time. This comes in, like I said, out of 12 albums, this is like my 8th favorite album. It's still a really good album, still a lot of great stuff in here, but not nearly as good as some of their top stuff, in my opinion. And I almost feel like, I hate to say that's overrated, but you almost want to say that this album's a little overrated. I don't quite understand why people love it as much as they do, and that's coming from someone who's a Beatles fan and likes this album a lot. It's number 49. It's my top 50. I think when I was looking at this album, I listened to it. I feel like every time I listen to the album, it gets lower on my list. because I think when I started, this was higher on my list. But then every time I listen to it, I just go, but there's these other songs I don't like. I think what kind of hurts the album is to me there's a lot of just mediocre songs on here, like When I'm 64, Fixing a Hole, Lovely Rita, The Benefit for Mr. Kite. To me, those are really like mediocre songs in the whole Beatles, discography, whatever. Uh, and then Within You, Without You is like one of my least favorites. It's one of the worst songs the Beatles ever did. I hate that song. It's the only George Harrison song on the album, and it's just a really long, boring Indian influenced song that it's just way too long, too boring. Definitely one of my least favorite songs. And I've heard people say that's their favorite song on the album, so it's just one of those weird things where we all have very differing opinions on this album. It's interesting because George Harrison just coming off of Revolver, where he had 3 killer songs on there, and then I always say that Indian influence really killed his momentum as a musician, and he could have been such a role. Of course, then Abbey Roads, he has 2 killer songs on that album, so he still had it in him, but I feel like he delved too much into the Indian music, and like, man, you have such potential to be a great songwriter on the level of a Lennon McCartney, and like you kind of wasted your talent. It's too bad. Anyway, that's just my opinion on that. I know some people love some of the stuff that he's doing in this period, but yeah, when you look at the album, I guess like I said, all those songs kind of hurt the album a little bit, and that's why it's kind of down on mine, because I just don't care for a lot of those songs. I want to skip a lot of even Sgt. Pepper's Lonely Heart Club Band. I can't even say the word. To me, it's just a mediocre rock song. A lot of people say it's a great rock song, but to me, it's just like this, it's not even a real song. It's like a fake intro song to a band that doesn't exist, to intro the album, and then a reprise, which is just the same song, just a little bit different lyrics to it. But I just don't care for that song either. But I know a lot of people love that song. But anyways, you might say, well, you sound like you hate this album. Like, no, I don't hate it. It's still good. And I'll talk about my favorite songs on here that really elevate the album. Obviously, it's very, like I said, the Beatles are definitely, they're changing. This is the first album that they did after they stopped touring. When they got to Rubber Soul, Revolver, they're still touring, but they weren't doing a lot of the songs off of those albums. They're doing more of their older material, I think. Of course, we had the infamous tour where they went to like the Philippines, and they had a horrible experience there. And they went to a lot of like Australia, I think, and they went to Japan, and so that was like the last tour that they're like, we're kind of done touring. Like, I think it was their last tour experience was like just really terrible internationally. Of course, then they played in San Francisco and Candlestick Park for the last official concert, but at that point they were just done touring. They hated it. They're tired. They've been doing it constantly for those 3-4 years, whatever. Anyway, so they kind of this is the album that really kind of changed things for the Beatles, where they weren't playing songs because before I think they were writing songs that they knew they would do in concert. So they were writing in a way that it would be easy to do. Anyways, this is an album where they wrote it like these are songs that you cannot play in concert. They're just way too complicated, way too difficult. It would be impossible to play these songs in concert at that time. I don't know if they had the technology to do it. Of course, today they can probably do it because of technology, but they put in so many different sounds and instruments and sound effects and backward tapes and backward guitars, and they were just doing all this crazy stuff at the time that you couldn't do it live anymore. So that's what makes it kind of a significant album in the Beatles, and kind of unique, is that when you listen to it, you're just like, wow, this is just a little bit different than what they used to play. It just feels a little different. I guess maybe that's what I don't like, because I love the Rubber Soul, Revolver albums and what they're doing there. Even though they're still doing some experimental stuff there, it still felt like the Beatles, like what they would do in concert. So they spent like so much time. I mean, when you look at, it's so interesting when you look at 1963, they're doing Please Please Me, and they do the whole album in a day. They record the whole album in one day. It's just crazy. And then you come to Sgt. Pepper's, I forget how much, but spent months and months on this album. I mean, spent like almost a whole year probably on making this album. Because usually they make 2 albums a year, I think. And then 1966, I think, is the first year where they only made one album, which was Revolver. And then this year, 1967, they only made one album, I believe, Sgt. Pepper. So they're kind of going to, like, we're slowing it down a little bit. We're only doing one album a year, not two. And, of course, they're the biggest band in the world, so they can start making their own rules, I suppose, at this time. And so, yeah, so all that changed for them. When you talk about this album with the Beatles, of course, it totally changed the way you do studio. The songwriting, of course, is great, instrumentation, but like what they're doing with the studio was just groundbreaking. And this whole thing about they were doing groundbreaking stuff even with Rubber Soul and Revolver, and then Brian Wilson from the Beach Boys was trying to compete with them, and he created Pet Sounds, which wasn't a huge hit at the time, but I mean now we see it as one of the great albums of all time, and just incredible studio work that Brian Wilson was doing with that album. It was groundbreaking. And then we see Paul was trying to compete with Brian Wilson, said, okay, let me try to do one better. And he does Revolver, and it's like, well, okay, this is like the best album of all time. And Brian Wilson tried to outdo that, and he couldn't do it, and then he had like a mental breakdown. And then the Beatles come out with this album, of course, and then Brian Wilson's like, well, I can never compete against this. This is way beyond what I can do by myself. Anyway, so sorry. So saying that, it really changed what rock bands were doing with studios. And yeah, studio work just totally changed. Spending more time in the studio, making a perfect album like this, what they think is, and the other albums. I don't have any water with me, or I drink some water. I'm already 12 minutes into this, so I don't want to stop. But with this, also with the Beatles, what I think is interesting, not only does this groundbreaking for musically, studio work, I think, but the Beatles, I think, they changed everything. Like, I think about fashion, like they were fashion icons in a sense, of course, they have these famous Sgt. Pepper outfits that they wore, and they wore in the Hello Goodbye music video. Anytime I see a Beatles tribute band, you always see them come out with that outfit. It's a very famous, iconic Beatles outfit that, you know, only Beatles kind of known for and kind of made unique to them. And they have it here on Sgt. Pepper's. And I think back, like, when they did Shea Stadium, they wore those cool, like, brown jackets, and I think my dad said when he was a kid, he like begged his parents, like he wanted that Beatles jacket and he wanted the Beatle boots. And of course, my grandparents were like, no, we're not giving you this. We don't have money to buy Beatles stuff for you, you know, whatever. You know, everybody wanted to be like, and when Beatles came out and they had the Beatle haircut, everybody wanted the Beatle haircut. That was just, nobody had hair that long. And so everybody's like, oh man, that's, you know, rebellious. I want that long kind of Beatle haircut. And so they totally changed kind of fashion in this sense. That's how huge they were. They changed everything. Everybody wanted to wear those outfits that they were wearing, I think. I mean, you watch the Get Back documentary, they definitely had a very colorful fashion sense, hippie, I call it 60s hippie fashion sense. That was very popular at the time, I think. And I'm sure a lot of people saw whatever they're wearing was like, I'm going to get that, you know. Whatever Beatles wanted to wear, people were going to wear. I remember when I was in London in 2015, I took this Beatles tour of all these Beatle places, whatever, this walking tour that this guy has done for decades. And he talked about, he made this comment about John Lennon at this time period. You know, he started wearing these round glasses. And he said they were called granny glasses. And they were not cool glasses. Only like grandmas wore these round glasses. And so it was very unusual for someone in their 20s to wear those kind of glasses. But John took those glasses and made it cool. And like now every time I see someone with round glasses, I'm like, I love that look. It's only because of John Lennon. And anytime I'm looking for sunglasses, I'm like, I want round sunglasses because I want to look like John Lennon. Even me today feels that way. I mean, so he made those glasses cool. I mean, it's just what the Beatles were. They made everything cool. Also, I think they changed the way he did the way you constructed an album maybe was different because, you know, it used to be just put in, you know, a couple of hit songs and a bunch of B-sides and that's your album. And then at this point it's like, no, we're really going to look at what songs we're going to put on there and we're going to construct this album. And I think it's a different way they did that. Also, the cover art, I think, changed. I don't think most of the cover of albums were just a picture of the band. And that's the way it was for a lot of Beatle albums. And so I think it was just like, okay, let's get the band, let's give them a prop, let's take a picture. That's good, you know. But Beatles, even before with, you know, maybe Revolver, but with this one especially, it was like totally changed the way you did. And I might be wrong, someone can correct me. Maybe the other bands were doing crazy cover art like this, but I mean, this was just, of course, I think it has to be the most iconic. This and Abbey Roads is like maybe the most iconic Beatles album cover of all time, and it's because they had, of course, all these different statues and or dummies, whatever, and different pictures of historical figures and pictures of themselves. I mean, you know, it's all these crazy. I mean, it's just a lot going on in that album cover, and I think it totally changed because I think album covers have, you know, gone crazier and gone more psychedelic and artistic. Anyway, so I think they changed it that way. Anyway, say that this is like one of the most iconic, most groundbreaking albums of all time. It definitely had to be on my list. I said it's a little bit lower just because I said some of the mediocre songs, but let me talk about my favorite songs on the album. My top three. Two songs that didn't make my top three, but I really like is Lucy in the Sky with Diamonds and A Little Help from My Friends. Very, whoops, hit the camera. Very iconic songs. A Little Help from My Friends, definitely, you know, top two, top three best Ringo song of all time. Real fun song to sing along to. Lucy Sky Diamonds is one of the most psychedelic songs of its time. It has great psychedelic imagery to it that I really like. Anyway, so definitely groundbreaking there. Number three, I'm going with Getting Better. Getting Better is maybe one of the more just straight rock songs on the album. Like I said, they did so much experimentation. There's not a lot of experimentation on this album, but I love the guitar in it. That high pitched guitar throughout. It's just so great. I love the sound of that, and just of course just a great sounding song. Paul McCartney mostly. You have the it's getting better, and then John says it can't get much worse. You know, you love that contrast between the two. Love the background singing of the other Beatles. So it feels more of a traditional Beatles song, which I like, but it's just, you know, Beatles are so good at writing these really nice, catchy pop rock songs, and this is one of those. I absolutely love the sound and the melodies and all that. So that's why number three, which a lot of people, I'm surprised nobody has Getting Better in their top three. I may be the only one, but I love that song. Number two, one of the most beautiful songs ever heard, She's Leaving Home. And this is a song like, I remember when I was a kid, I don't think, this wasn't a song I wasn't really familiar with because you never see, they of course never played it live. I never seen a Beatles tribute band play it live. It's not really a song you play at a concert. And you never really, it was never like a hit single or anything. But it's one of my favorite Beatles songs. I absolutely love it. It's so beautiful. It's almost like, to me, like one of the most underrated songs of all time in the Beatles song list. Love it. Love that harpsichord. It's so beautiful. And I think there's some orchestra music in there. I love orchestra music. So when they put it in a rock song like this or pop song, and so I love that combination of the harpsichord and the harp and the orchestra music. So beautiful. And Paul, great vocals in it, and it tells a story. I love songs that tell stories. I love listening to it and just picturing in my mind what's going on in the song with this girl is leaving her parents because they're like rich, uptight people, I guess, and they won't let her do what she wants to do. So she's running away during the middle of the night. And I love how each verse starts at, you know, at 5 o'clock you know, it always starts with like a time period, like at such time this happened. Now, at such time this happened. So you kind of follow the story by the time period. I love that idea, unique, I think, to the song. And I just love, you know, she's running away and the parents are like, why did she run away? And they're kind of sad. And then I love the chorus of I love the great high notes that Paul's hit, and of course, great tenor singer that he is. He's hitting these, she's leaving home, you know, she's doing that, or he's doing that, and then John and George are doing kind of these, almost a call and response kind of thing. We gave her most of her, whatever, is leaving, but sacrificed most of her. I love that back and forth is so great. And the notes are amazing vocals by Paul in this, and great harmony. I mean, great melody, and just a beautiful song. I absolutely love this one. She's Leaving Home, number two. Number one is the one that everybody says is number one, and I have to say it too. A Day in the Life, that ends the album. Great ending to the album. Kind of this epic song in a sense. I love kind of these epic long songs that do something different. And I even love just the beginning of just that beginning of the acoustic guitar coming in and the piano, bum 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 bum, and then John coming in. I heard the news today. Oh boy, like that's such a great opening line. I think in a song that really just catches you. Like, oh, he heard the news. What did he hear? You know. And the whole song is him reading a newspaper and just talking about the stuff in the newspaper. It's such a really interesting way to write a song, and just I love the lyrics of the song kind of because of that. And we'd hear like guy blew his mind out in a car, might be JFK, I think they're talking about. Saw a film how they won the war. John was in a film called How We Won the War, I think. You know, and all this, and the Blackbird, Lancashire, and how many holes fill up the hall, Albert Hall. You know, talking about potholes in the street, I think. And you know, it's going through all these news stories, and John's voice is so great. I love his vocals, and such a nice, easygoing song kind of throughout the first part. And I love the turn. It gets a little more psychedelic with the "I love to turn you on," you know, that's that part. And then what makes the song so great to me is that it's not. If it was just that, it was still a great song. But what just makes it, you know, it's one of the best songs ever is that you then have the orchestra build-up, which I love that orchestra build-up. And the crescendo, and then da 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 bum. Never heard that before in a song. I mean, that's such a groundbreaking, just genius idea. If John came up with that, or George Martin, or whatever, just a great idea of that orchestra build up, and then that bomb, and then we hit this weird like bridge, or this weird just a couple verses of Paul singing about woke up, dragged a comb across my head, you know. Went outside for a smoke, and I fell into the anyways, it's just it's a crazy thing where he's all of a sudden it's totally different from everything else, and you're like, what is this? Is this a song? Did the song change? Are we in a different song? No, it's the same song, just they totally change it up. And then we get back to John, dun 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 dun, I heard, you know, and then he goes back into that, and you're like, oh man, that's so great. And then it ends with the orchestra build up again, and just boom, and that's the end. And it's like, oh, what a great way to end a song with the orchestra build up. And I feel like you can't do that again, because if you do it, you're just copying the Beatles, you know. So it's like maybe I don't know if anybody else has done that before, but it's like I feel like if you do it, you're just a copier. So she's like they almost own the rights to the orchestra build up to that bomb, and it's so great, such a great sound. Anyways, and so yeah, definitely one of the great songs, one of my favorite Beatles songs, "A Day in the Life." Anyways, John's best contribution to this album, because a lot of people say you look at it. This is definitely Paul heavy. A lot of the albums were John heavy, and then you get to this one, it feels like Paul really was like the genius behind this album. He came up with the idea of the album, Sgt. Pepper's, and he came up with the idea like, oh, let's pretend like we're another band, and it was almost a concept album, but then it didn't become a concept album, and so he kind of came up with all that, and then he has, like I said, yes, she's, you know, leaving home, getting better. He does some of my songs I don't like When I'm 64, and Lovely Rita, and Fixin' a Hole. So he has a lot of songs in here, if I remember right, and I'm forgetting some songs probably. He definitely dominates. John, it seems like there's talks of like he's just kind of drifting away from the Beatles a little bit. You kind of feel it during this album. I mean, Benford Mr. Kite, like I said, I don't like some like that song. I don't like it. Day in Life, obviously, a great song. Lucy in the Sky is definitely one of the top songs on here, but that was about it. That's about his whole contribution. It did seem like he contributed a lot. And you go George. George only had one song, Within You Without You, which is not one of his best at all. And I think, in fact, the story is that when they said, okay, they always feel like we need one Ringo song, and usually they have, you know, 2 George songs. Revolver has 3, but most albums have maybe 2 George sung songs, maybe 1 in the early part of the Beatles, but you know, so I'm sure they're like, you know, George, what do you got? And then the story is like George put out not Within You Without You, but he put in Only a Northern Song, I believe, was his contribution. Was like, here's a song I wrote, Only a Northern Song. and they basically said, that song's not good enough. You know, they said we need a better song for this album, and that didn't cut it because this is going to be a great album. And so then he later came up with Within You Without You, and they decided to put that on the album. I guess maybe they thought it fit the psychedelic of the album. I think Only Northern Song's a better song, so that would have made the album better if they put Only Northern Song on there. But anyway, so George wasn't really contributing a whole lot. So it was like Paul's. Really, he was the one that drove this album, anyways, and made it, you know, so iconic. I always say Paul McCartney's legacy is probably this album, as one of the greatest singer-songwriters of all time. Anyways, in my opinion. So that's my opinion on this album. At number 49, Sgt. Pepper's Lonely Hearts Club Band. So comment if you think I'm crazy for putting this low. What do you think about this album? Is it your favorite album? I think Rich Strickler you might like this album more than me. I don't remember. This is your favorite album? I think Glenn Kellaway it's his favorite album. A guy that I follow on YouTube. So I know some love this album more than I do. But yeah, feel free to comment what you think about the album. What you think about my comments. Love to read them. Just thank you for watching the video. Thank you for liking it. Thank you to the subscribers for supporting the channel. And I really appreciate you. And have a good day.